Welcome to the Leadership Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Jonno White. I'm the founder and principal consultant of Clarity. We are an Australian-based consultancy that works with leaders around the world, and our passion is to invest in people to become everything they're meant to be in order to fill the world with healthy organizations that people love to work for and customers line up to buy from. The goal of this podcast is to invest in you and your leadership. If you're just joining us for the first time, then feel free to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, the most popular being our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from around the world in all different sectors give their in-depth answers on leadership, what books they love, what they found most challenging, the most meaningful stories, how they structure their time through the day. That's free, so go and check it out. And we'd love to interview you about your leadership. I believe you have advice from your experience, your context, and your life so far that is important and can help other leaders. It's also a great way to give back. It's free to get involved, and you can do so by going to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or just Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form that pops up. We have a free resource for you on our website. It's called Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook. It has interviews with 10 world-class leaders, and you can go to consultclarity.org. It's right at the top, and get that today. We also have a daily email that we send out to over 15,000 leaders, and that email contains the highlights, our best content from our podcasts, our blog, my book, the books that we're loving that are out there about leadership. It's also the best way to get access to our masterclasses and workshops before anyone else. And there's also exclusive and limited special options just for subscribers. And you can subscribe by going to consultclarity.org/subscribe. Now, my gift to you is to work incredibly hard to provide the best leadership content I can to invest in you and your leadership. So if you're finding our content helpful, if you find this podcast helpful, then your gift to me could be this. If you do find it helpful, then write a review or rate our content and make sure you subscribe or follow. I can't emphasize enough how helpful that is. It really does help us to get the word out there so we can invest in more leaders to become everything they're meant to be. It also means a lot to me personally when people like you and people in our community share our content on social media. So if you do that, then please do look for me, Jonno White, to tag me, and look to tag Clarity on whatever platform you're on. And our team, including me, I'm always looking to see when people have mentioned us so that I can engage with you. And also, we look at sharing content. So if you write something about something we've done, there's also a good chance we'll share that with our followers. So if you could do that, that is a massive, massive help as we try to invest in as many leaders as we can around the world. Last of all, you can check out my book about how to deal with difficult people even if you hate conflict. It's called Step Up or Step Out. It's available on Amazon. You can just look up Step Up or Step Out Jonno White, or you can go to store.consultclarity.org/book and check it out there. I have coached leader after leader after leader, and in more than 50% of the sessions, this topic comes up. How do I deal with this person? I'm finding it really difficult, and I just want to find a way that doesn't blow up to just to have a difficult conversation, to lead them better. How do I do that? There's a 3-step process that I outline in this book that I believe can help you. Okay, let's get into today's episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Enjoy. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Today's guest is Jeff Lestz. Jeff is the CEO of Genistar. He's also the author of a book called Against All Odds. Welcome to the podcast, Jeff.
Thank you so much, Jonno. Good to be with you here on the other side of the world.
Yeah, it is always just kind of cool to do this with people who are literally on the other side of the world. First of all, Jeff, tell us a little bit about Genistar and what you do as CEO.
Yeah. So, Genistar, we're based in the United Kingdom. I'm based in London, even though I have an American accent, which I'm sure we'll get into that. And I've lived in the UK now since 2003. And Genistar is a financial education company and also a financial services company. So we really help people to kind of plan their futures and make the right decisions when it comes to money.
Yeah, amazing. Such an important area. For people, and great to hear that. I'm so excited to hear some of your story. Let's start with your childhood and growing up, Jeff. What are some of the moments from that season in your life that really shaped you into the person and the leader you are today?
Mm. Well, thank you, Jonno. I've got such an interesting background in that I grew up in Chicago. Was actually raised in a Jewish family and the youngest of three children. And when I was five, my father had his own business, lost the business, and basically was bankrupt, became so depressed over it that sadly took his own life, left my mother with three small kids, loads of debt, and she had a nervous breakdown, became an alcoholic. We obviously went on to welfare. Um, and about a year and a half after my father died, the state of Illinois Jewish Children Family Services stepped in and declared my mother incompetent, which she was. And they took us away from my mother, separated all three of us kids into different orphanages and foster homes. And about a year after that, I would have been eight, she died. And so I was in and out of foster care and orphanages from basically the age 7 until I was 13. And then when I was 13, sadly, I attempted suicide also and was locked up in an institution for a few months, ran away when I was 13, and lived on the streets of Chicago until I was 15 years old. And you know, whenever people say, "Boy, you're a survivor," well, I tell you, go live on the streets of Chicago, especially in the freezing cold, and that'll definitely toughen your skin. And then when I was 15, I was very fortunate. I had a guy that was just a few years older than me. He was 21. I was 15, and he took me in, became my foster father. And he and the pastor of a church that we had gotten involved in, these two men really began to mentor me. And, at that point, I really straightened my life up, went back to high school, became an honor student. The first week I was in high school, it was in a rural area, Jono, and back this is like 19 in the early 1970s, sort of the height of the hippie movement.
Mm.
And I was the only hippie in the high school. Everybody else, had crew cuts and, what they call burr heads, where they just sort of shaved their heads in a very rural area outside of Chicago. And there was only one other hippie in the whole high school. Her name was Margot. And she and I became friends, dated through high school and university, got married. And we've been married now for over 40 years. And yeah, and
Wow.
then I got into business, went on to university for a couple of years, didn't like it. And my foster father had become a financial planner, and he
Mm.
recruited me when I was 19 years old. And I was just fascinated with the fact that, we go through 14,000 hours of education, and yet we don't learn anything about money. They teach us how to dissect a frog or Pythagoras theory. That's all great stuff. I don't think I've ever used it. Um, but money is something that we use every day. And so when I was 19, I got into financial planning, and it's interesting because mathematics was my worst subject in school. But when there was a dollar sign in front of it, it kind of took on a whole new meaning. And that's what I've been doing now for 46 years. I've been in the financial planning business, and
Wow.
you know, I have such a passion for it,
Mm,
not just because of making money, but also because of the fact that, boy, what would have happened if my father could have been empowered to
yeah.
realize that suicide wasn't the option, but there was a way out, of this financial depression that he had. And
Yes.
yeah, so that's a little bit of my background.
Yeah, I mean, that's just breathtaking. Your story is, and I think you just hit the nail on the head with the title of your book, Against All Odds. I mean, that's the first question that pops into my head, Jeff, is I mean, people talk about having a tough childhood, and you know, everyone's story is different and it's valid for each of us, but yours is legitimately right up there. And I mean, that's just some horror circumstances for a young person. What do you? And I know this is probably an oversimplification, but I can't help but ask: what do you put it down to as to why you are where you are now, against all odds, after
Yeah,
growing up? Like, are
yeah.
there? I mean, there might be a million things. There might be one thing. What do you put it down to? How have you ended up doing what you're doing after such, yeah, against all odds, such a challenging, first 15 years of your life?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I don't think it's an oversimplification at all. And in my book, Against All Odds, I actually cover, what it was that really changed my life. But I think if I had to boil it down to three things, number one is desire. I got to tell you, at 15 years old, most kids are thinking about, girls and baseball and, cricket and rugby or whatever, whatever sport it is that people play. And I was thinking about survival. And at that point in my life, I had such a desire to get my life straightened out. You've heard the term, you got to get sick and tired of being sick and tired. And at that point in my life, I did. I actually cried out. And, even though I was born and raised in a Jewish family, but honestly, in my heart, I didn't really even believe that there was a God. In fact, I remember thinking as a teenager, if there was a God, boy, he sure has a cruel sense of humor, all this stuff I'm having to go through. But I did. I said, God, if you're really real, help me get my life straightened out. And so it was desire. That's the number one thing. You gotta want to change. You have fire in the
Mm,
belly of, boy, I just, I've come to the end of my rope, and I really want to make a change in my life. So that was number one, is desire. Secondly, and without getting overly churchy or spiritual or anything, um, no doubt about it that a a faith based change in my life happened when I went to this little church in a rural area and heard the gospel and accepted the Lord in my life. No doubt about it that changed my life and gave me the faith that I didn't have to try to do this on my own, if you will. And then the third thing was, and really equally as important as the other two, was finding a couple of mentors and finding uh, some people that I knew had my best interest at heart, had absolutely no ulterior motive, or didn't have an agenda. And the my foster father, the pastor at the church, really the whole community that was this little rural area in southern Illinois. It was less than 1,000 people population, and so it was the school teachers. It was I remember my first job. The mayor of this little village gave me my first job. As a teenager working in the summer, and just so many wonderful people that really spoke into my life. And all of a sudden I began to realize that you got to really be careful who you allow to speak into your life and who you allow to influence you.
Mm,
And
mm,
up to that point in my life, I had allowed, other teenagers and drug dealers and people on the streets, and you know, hey, I was hanging out with the wrong crowd, and you will become what you think about. You will become like the people that you hang around. And so I was very fortunate that at 15 I got my life straightened out. But I would say that those are the three things, Jonno, would be desire,
mm.
faith, and then also finding some incredible mentors, not just at 15,
Yeah.
but really over the last 50 years that I've, since that time,
Mm.
finding some great people in business. And yeah, it's been so fortunate to really have had the influence and had the right people in my life.
Yeah, it's incredible. I so appreciate you sharing your story, and it's it just is such an amazing story, Jeff. And I want to know, obviously, when you have challenges like you had growing up, losing both your parents when you were so little, and so much of it is setting you up for difficulty and challenge. And at the same time, like you mentioned about living on the streets in Chicago, there must have been a sense where, like you said,
Mm.
well, you think this is tough, live on the streets in winter in Chicago for a little bit, and so, what did you learn from some of those hardest moments when you were little that you feel has really stuck with you in leadership even today? What lessons did you learn when you were living on the street? Anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting when I wrote my book. At the end of each chapter, I actually give the top two life lessons that I learned, and you're going to like this because I've actually I'm got my book open here, and on page 151, I actually give two of the life lessons that I think answer your question, which is number one, your attitude affects your altitude. If you got a crummy attitude, life's going to be crummy. And then the second thing is the books you read and the people that you affiliate with affect who you become. So I would say that those were really the two biggest life lessons that I learned,
Hmm.
while living on the streets. And Jono, I hope it's okay to do this. One of the
Hmm.
things you find out about me is I love to tell jokes.
Yeah.
And I just got a story that I always love to share. Is it okay just to share this?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Please.
Okay, great. So you may have heard this story before, but this just kind of shows the difference between positive attitude and the negative attitude. And there were two professors of psychology, and they were debating whether is it in your DNA that you're positive or negative? Is it the influences your environment? And so they had opposing views, and they decided to do an experiment. So they get these two boys in that are like 10 years old, and one is always negative, one is always positive. And they take the negative kid, put him in a positive environment in a room with video games and toys and candy and all the things that a 10-year-old kid would love. And they take the positive kid and they put him in a room that he is like waist deep in horse manure. And they've got a two-way mirror, where they can, the kid sees the mirror, he doesn't know he's being observed, and they're watching him. And the negative kid starts playing with his video games, and after about 10 minutes he starts whining, oh, this candy is sticky, these aren't the kind of games that I have at home, I don't like these, the toys are stupid. And the one psychologist said, listen, I'm telling you, it's not their environment. And so the other guy said, well, let's see how the other kids do. And they go to view, and it looks like a snowstorm in there. In fact, they can't see anything because the whole window is covered with horse manure. And they open up the door. They're both holding their nose. they can't see the kid. And one of the psychologists said, "Stop, stop." And he's throwing horse manure up in the air and he's covered from head to toe. And he's got this big, goofy grin on his face. And one psychologist said, "How can you be so happy in here?" And he said, "Hey, mister, with all this manure in here, there's got to be a pony down here somewhere." And I think that that really reflects life is that, hey, listen, we all go through crap, okay? We all go through the horse manure in life, whether it's the pandemic or your parents dying or whatever it is, stuff happens. And it really is a decision that you have to make, something you have to work on every single day is your attitude. And
Mm.
it really, it affects your whole life.
I love that, and I love that joke. That's gold. I think I one of the things that you said around the books you read, the people you hang around, that's massive. Um, is there anything else, any other advice you'd give from your experience, in life so far, about if you feel like you're the sort of person who gets sick of video games rather than looking for a pony in the manure? Is there, where do you start? How do you how do you change your attitude if someone listening is going, I want to be more like that, I do want to actually have a better attitude? Can you give any advice on how to change?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. My foster father, as I was a teenager, I mean, you can imagine coming off the streets. I got a bad attitude. I mean, every other word is a curse word, and it took me a few months to clean up my language and my attitude. And he very tactfully said to me, he said, "Jeff, do you want to win in life?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." And he said, "Well, I'm going to give you two books that could really help you." Now, I was 15 years old, and again, coming off the streets. And so he gave me two books. One was, and it's an old book called "The Power of Positive Thinking" by Norman Vincent Peale. And boy, as I read that book, it was just explosive in my brain, going, man, I have got to work on my attitude. Your mind is a mental muscle. And I was so fascinated with the fact that anybody can be positive, but you have to make a decision. It's like losing weight or any other discipline in our lives. And so that was one book, was The Power of Positive Thinking. That changed my life. And in fact, I read that book about every 5 or 6 years, still to this day. I still
Wow,
read it. Okay. The
that's
second
so
book
good.
was called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I'm showing my age because these are two old books, but they're just two classics. I mean, they just work. And if you want to be successful in a people business,
Mm.
then I would, that was so helpful. And all of a sudden, I began to get along with my school teachers and my classmates, and I began to realize that if I'm ever going to go into business or work at a job and be effective and climb the ladder and have success in life, I better become a good people person, and I better learn how to to love people and use money, not love money and use people. And those two books were
Mm.
incredibly, incredibly helpful in changing my attitude about life. And I have a confession to make. Some 50 years, because it was actually 50 years ago when that change happened in my life.
Wow.
And to this day, I still have to work on my attitude. I still have to bite my lip when I want to, the street kid still comes out once in a while. And I still have to have that mental discipline in my life to say, Jeff, don't say anything that you're going to regret later. It's amazing how that our lips can either give life or death.
Yeah.
We can either offend, or we can inspire. And so, yeah, so those two books to this date, I still read. In fact, just last year, I read again How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I think I'm a pretty good people person, but I still read it. And
Mm.
every time I read it, I still get something new out of it.
It's such a good book, and they're both such great books and wonderful. And I love that you literally went to and what one of the things you do to continue to work on your attitude is to read those books. And I really do think, like you said, if you can be intentional about the books you read and also about the people who are around you, then that makes all the difference. That's a massive impact on how we think, which, like you said, will then play out in the rest of our life.
Yeah. I think also, Jono, that as I've looked at leaders and that get off track and people that never get on the right track, they don't have any accountability to anybody. And when you start getting some success in your life, I think it's so important to have self imposed accountability to other people. I just called up a good friend of mine just this week, and he lives in Israel. And just I texted him and said, "Hey, do you have a few minutes?" And so we chatted for I don't know 45 minutes or so. He had some time, and there's a proverb that says, "In the multitude of counselors, there's safety." And so to this day, at 65 years old, when we're doing this broadcast, I've got pretty good success in my life. I've been a millionaire longer now than when I wasn't a millionaire. So became a millionaire at 31. So for 34 years, I have been a millionaire. And it's one thing to make it; it's another thing to keep it. But to this day, I still discipline myself for accountability and for people that I know can speak into my life, are going to have a good effect, but also will be honest with me. They're not just going to tickle my ears and tell me what I want to hear. And it is important, again, who you allow to speak into your life. And that's why, I think it's so important that you have some accountability. And I have, a handful of friends that I still call up periodically, and I say, "Hey, I need some counsel from you." I don't know if you've ever heard this saying that says, "If you're the smartest person in your group, you probably need to change groups because you're not being challenged." And
Yeah.
so I try to, hang out with people that are smarter than me because I want to learn. And
Mm.
I think this goes back to the whole desire thing. If you're not green and growing, most likely you're ripe and rotting. And I love the fact that I'm in my mid 60s right now, and I'm still as excited about life as back when I was 15 or 25 or 35,
Mm.
but again, it's a discipline. You have to, I'm not saying that that's every single day of my life. Hey, there's days that I get up and go, why am I still working? I don't have to do this. But
Mm.
then I go back to my mission of why I do what I do. And it goes back to the fact that, you're helping leave a legacy and help changing people's lives.
Absolutely. I want to ask you, you've been on the streets as a 14-year-old and a millionaire for 30 years. Two such incredibly different scenarios. What were the biggest challenges about when you were, say, on the streets in Chicago, and what are the biggest challenges when, now that you've made it to this side of where you are, like you said, as a millionaire. And I'm interested to know, what are the biggest challenges of those, because there's always different problems, right? And it's a bit like that manure and video game joke again. It's like, if you think that just by achieving whatever you want to achieve that your problems will go away, that they don't. It's just a different set of challenges and problems. So yeah, I'm interested to know, what were the biggest challenges when you were on the street versus what are the biggest challenges did you find, maybe particularly when you first became successful? Did you find anything really challenging about that?
Yeah. Well, listen, whether I was living on the streets or whether I was, having success in my life or having challenges, looking for the good in a bad situation is always a challenge for everybody. There's there's a saying that says you're either uh, going into a crisis, in the middle of a crisis, or coming out of a crisis. And so, that's part of life. I mean, it's not a on a straight trajectory up. Things go up, things go down, whether it's the stock market or the price of property or your business or life in general, and challenges and health and all the other things that go with it. And so, certainly living on the streets, boy, I mean, it was tough. It was really tough. I mean, many, many times at night after restaurants would close, I'd be going out around the back in the alley and digging through the rubbish, to eat somebody's leftover food, or some moldy bread, and or stealing something out of a supermarket just to be able to survive, to be able to feed myself. So, it was a little bit like living like an animal. I mean, I was in survival mode, which is not any fun. I don't know anybody that goes, gee, I'd like to have a life of poverty. That sounds good to me. Um, and and I think that on this side of success, one of the keys is to never really get caught up in yourself. One of my mentors used to always say, the day you start believing the press about yourself, that everybody's giving you all the accolades, the day you start believing that's probably the day that you're on a decline. So yeah, I think it's you look at people that start thinking that that they're better than everybody, and it's amazing how that it goes back to the root of how to win friends and influence people. And really, if it's all boiled down, I think it boiled down to one thing: just treat people like you want to be treated, and everybody wants to be treated with respect. So whether it's a person that's
Mm.
a janitor or a beggar on the street or a CEO of a company, I mean, why would you treat anybody different? So I think that that's probably helped me, going through life as I have. It's
Mm.
really helped me just to know what it is to not have anything, to also know what it is to have everything, if you will. Not saying I have everything, because there's a difference in your wants and needs. I'm not a billionaire, but we have a wonderful life, and I'm happy. And most importantly, I've got peace in my life. I've got a great marriage. I've got great friends. I've got, I don't know if you've ever seen this wheel. It's called the seven F's. And you kind of look at the balance in your life, and there's different things on there. Faith, family, friends, finance, fitness, and all those things. Someone can go, well, boy, he's a real success. He's a multi-millionaire. He's a billionaire. Yeah, I know, but how's the rest of his life? He's been on his fifth marriage. Well, to me, that's not success. I'd rather have a wonderful, happy life, but have less. And I'm not saying that every billionaire is like that. I have a good friend of mine in the States, Art Williams, who is a billionaire, and the
Mm.
guy is a wonderful human being, and he's been happily married for, I don't know, probably close to 60 years now, and he's just a wonderful human being. He's a good guy. He's not a jerk. And
Mm.
I always find, Jonno, that if people say, "Well, I know people that have money and they're a jerk." Trust me, okay. Money helps you become a better person if you're a good person, and if you're a jerk, it just helps you be a bigger jerk.
Yeah.
So
That's right. It just
money doesn't make you bad.
it just magnifies what's already there, doesn't
Boy, it sure does. Sure
it?
does. Yeah.
Oh, some wonderful advice there. I'm interested to know, Jeff, as you think about your career as a leader so far, are there any aha moments in leadership that really spring to mind where where you made a mistake and it stuck with you, a lesson you learned, or you had some great advice from someone and you took it and it turned out to be even more important than you realized? Like or just something that might have seemed simple, but for some reason it's always stuck with you as a bit of a shift and an aha moment for you.
Yeah. By the way, you say any mistakes. I think we're going to have to do that like on a whole nother podcast.
That can be our follow up.
Oh, Lord. Yeah. Reminds me of the book by John Maxwell called Fail Forward, And yeah, if you've never failed, you've never tried. So, yeah, no, listen, I have aha moments every day of my life, with our team, and I really try to surround myself with people that are smarter than me, and I know that I'm not the smartest guy in the world, and so I just try to surround myself with smart people, and try to get counsel from them. And I have to say, the best counselor that I've ever had and that I have now is my wife. She just for those of you that have a partner that are listening to this, Jonno, I almost hate to admit this, and the guys are going to hate me, and the women will love me for it. I don't think Margot's ever been wrong. She just, women have this sixth sense about them that they just, they just have this incredible, deep wisdom. And so I would say that was one of the aha moments for me several years ago, and I still have to remind myself of it. Is I'd say all the good decisions I've ever made is when Margot and I really talked it through and dissected it and really took our time at making the right decision. All the bad decisions were decisions that I made on my own without consulting her, or she just didn't have time to give me her input because she was busy with her own, life and projects and other things, which, happens. And yeah, so I would say that's probably been one of the biggest lessons that I've learned from a leadership standpoint. Um, yeah, and just that every day you can learn something new, and don't be afraid to change. Don't get locked
Mm.
into one set of an attitude that I'm right and everybody else is wrong. Um, yeah. So I would say that would be it. And building a team of people, it's amazing if you've ever read the book either called Think and Grow Rich or his Napoleon Hill's first book was actually called The Wisdom of Andrew Carnegie. And most people have not read it. They've read Think and Grow Rich. And the book, The Wisdom of Andrew Carnegie, is actually an interview. The very first book, Napoleon Hill was 19 years old, interviewed Andrew Carnegie, who at that time was the wealthiest person in the world. And one of the keys that he had was have a mastermind group of like minded people. And to this day in business, I have to say that we have a mastermind group of like-minded people, and we talk about things. And some of the best ideas we come up with are sometimes a joke. I mean, somebody go, "Yeah, well, why don't we do this?" And I go, "Well, that's actually not a bad idea. That's really outside the box." And so I think
Mm.
from a leadership standpoint, get your ego out of the way. And it's I think it was Harry Truman who said, "It's amazing what we can accomplish when we don't care who gets the credit."
Yeah, yeah, that's so poignant. Thank you for sharing that. Um, this has just
Mm.
been so much fun, Jeff. Let's jump into a few Leadership Express questions as we bring this episode to a landing, knowing that at some point it would be great. I mentioned before we started recording, I'd love to have you back for a follow up, and we can One option is to talk about your failures. No, it'd be great to hear a bit more of your story and maybe zoom in on some of your journey. Because there's a lot that we haven't talked about today. So yeah, the invitation's there, but I want to ask you about one-on-one meetings. So here's one question for you: What advice would you give listeners about how to run great one-on-one meetings with your team members?
One-on-one. Um, you know, Art Williams, who was one of my mentors, he was the founder of a company in the US called Primerica. And he used to always say, praise in public and coach or correct in private. And again, it's a tough lesson to learn in leadership, is that, praise people that are doing the right things. And if someone's not, then you take them one-on-one individually. And, God gave us two ears, two eyes, and one mouth, and we should use them in direct proportion. And I think just, learn how to ask the right questions and really find out what challenges people are having in their life. It's the old adage, people don't really care what you know until they know that you care. So I would say to me that would be the biggest leadership thing is, you got to really care about your people. It's interesting. Jonno, Margot and I were never blessed to have kids, but I look at our team, and some of them are older than me, and some are young. Most of them are younger. But I look at them like family. I look at them like my own kids, even our clients. And I think when you treat people like family, I know there's a lot of management philosophy that goes, don't get too close to your people, but I've never been able to learn that. I still think you can be friendly, but not familiar. But yeah, just, again, I think it goes back to the golden rule to, do unto others like want to be done to you, and treat people like you want to be treated, whether it's one-on-one or whether it's in a group.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Wonderful advice, and I agree. I think you can 100% keep things appropriate and be people's, greatest advocates. And it comes up all the time on the podcast, and I love that you mentioned that how you feel, that you're so passionate about investing in your people, and it is a lot like parenting, because a parent is that person who will have, they'll face that young person and tell them what they need to hear, and
Yeah.
because they love them. And I think that's what great leadership is. It's having that deep, having their back so significantly that they know that you have the best interest, and then being willing
Yeah.
to have the tough conversations. It's easier said than done, but I think you put it really well.
Yeah. Jonno, if I could just share this real quickly, just
Yeah.
this week, I had an employee come to me. He's been with us for a couple of years. I think he started when he was 17. He's now 19. Here in the UK, it's called an apprenticeship program where they serve with you for a couple of years. And he's in our media department, and he came to me and he said, "Listen, I really feel bad. I was just offered this fantastic position at a major company, a blue chip company, and it's an opportunity of a lifetime." And he laid out for me, they're going to pay for his university fees and just a bunch of other things, and just having it on his resume, his CV. And he said, you know, "Jeff, what would you suggest I do?" Now, I got to tell you, from a selfish standpoint, I don't want to lose the guy. We've invested a lot in him for 2 years. But that's what the apprenticeship program is all about, is you either prepare them to move on or you keep them. And I wanted to keep him. But he's had this incredible opportunity. And I sat there and said, if I was 19, or if this was my son, or yeah, he's actually young enough to be my grandson, what would I tell him? And I looked at him, and his name is Michael. I said, "Michael, I said, can I tell you something? I said, first of all, we want you to know, man, that we love you. We appreciate all your hard work for the last 2 years. But if I was in your shoes, I got to tell you, and this is tough for me to say, I'd be taking advantage of it. But here's what I want you to know: the door here at Genistar is always open. Okay, you've been a fantastic employee, and Margot and I really wish you the best. We wish you all the happiness in the world. I got to tell you, I hate losing employees, but I want the best for the guy. And if he was my grandson, that's what I would have told him to do. And I think you have to get your self interest out of the way and really look at people and say what's best for them, not what's best for me, but what's best for
Mm,
them. And that goes
yeah.
back to a mental discipline of do it. If you just, it's amazing when you always tell the truth, you never have to remember what you said. And if you always do the right thing, then you don't have to worry about it coming back to you.
Yeah. It's Yeah, I mean, it's funny you mentioned that. One of my favorite pieces of advice from the podcast was from Dr. Philip Moulds, who's a great educator. He's a principal of a school in regional Queensland here in Australia. And he talked about how he has this filter where he uses his kids' names. And when he's making a decision, he says, what would I want? I think his daughter's name off the top of my head is Claire. And he'd say, what would I want Claire's employer to do? If this person was Claire, what would I want their boss to do? And I thought, oh, that's so good, because I think sometimes we go, I want to put my interests aside, but boy, that's hard to do. It's even hard to have that perspective sometimes. And so I think, having some tools to actually, and it comes back to, the themes that you mentioned from the start. It's about having those people you can go to as well, and get advice to get perspective. Maybe sometimes we need to hear, you know what, I think you need to encourage them to go and do it. The only reason you're not doing that is because it'd be better for you if they stayed with the organization. And so yeah, whatever it takes to do that, if you can find a way to work out what's truly in their best interest and pursue that, then I truly do believe, there's that great Zig Ziglar quote, which I can never remember off the top of my head, but it's that idea that if you help enough people get what they want, then you'll end up
You'll
getting
get
what
what
you
you
want.
want.
Yeah. So I
That's
think
right.
you hit the
Yeah.
nail on the head.
It's interesting. We had an employee about 3 years ago that had been in a different industry. She was with us for a couple of years. She had a new job come open. Again, she was in tears. She's like, I really don't want to leave. And I told her, I said, listen, you're always welcome to come back. It's so interesting. A year ago, after she'd been gone for 2 years, she said, I love working for you, Jeff. Can I please come back? She said, it's just been, kind of a nightmare the last 2 years. I said, yeah, absolutely. So, you treat them good when they're there. And if they decide to leave, you still treat them good. And it is amazing how you always end up reaping what you sow.
100%. Okay, last question. If you could only give one piece of leadership advice to a young leader, what would you say to them?
I would say find a mentor. And by the way, that doesn't have to be somebody that you're able to talk to. You know, for years, I read John Maxwell's books. Um, and now John's a good friend of mine. He's the first endorsement in my book. Um, but I read all of his material first, and then it's amazing how that door opened up, and I did get to meet him, and we became good friends. Jim Rowan, I read all of Jim's stuff, and this is many years ago. Of course, he's passed away now, and I met Jim in the U.S., and we got to know each other. I don't know if you've ever heard the name Rabbi Daniel Lapin. Yeah, have you ever heard of him, Jonno?
Yeah, I have heard the name. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, incredible. I mean, if you just go onto YouTube and watch material. He's probably got 100 hours of free stuff on YouTube. But I bought his entire package. I think it was $1,000 that I spent, um, and and then I wrote him after I'd studied everything, so I wasn't taking up his time to ask him loads of questions. And to this date, we're good friends, and he is one of those handful of people that I speak with on a regular basis, and get counsel from. And so I would say one of the most important things is decide what you want your life to look like. I mean, you can construct how you want your life to look. But in order to do that, you need to be able to tie in to someone that's wiser and smarter than you. And I would say one of the best resources is to, you know, most people know who John Maxwell is, but if you
Mm,
don't, um, I mean, John Maxwell, in my opinion at least, is the best, the
mm,
cream, the cream of la cream when it comes to leadership. I mean, the guy
mm-hmm,
is common sense, and
mm-hmm.
and I tell you this, he's a wonderful human being. He really is. Um, you
Yeah.
know, so yes, I would say if somebody wants to become a leader, hang out with people that you want to become like. And when I say hang out, it doesn't mean that you have to be physically there,
Mm,
but I subscribe to John Maxwell's podcast, listen to it on a regular basis. Rabbi Lapin, I'm continue to be a good student and never get too caught up in what your success is. Always remember where you came from, and I think
mm.
that's something that I've been pretty good at is remembering the grassroots where I came from. If you never forget where you came from, then you'll always treat people well.
Such great advice. And if people are listening and feeling, I always think of that person who's sort of pulled over because they were on the road somewhere and it's just really been the episode for them that they needed to hear. Then a great starting point is, in terms of finding someone to mentor you. I love Jeff's advice. Yes, you want to find people in real life where you can spend time with them, but start with John Maxwell. Start with How to Win Friends and Influence People. Start with some of the other resources we've mentioned, and also and I'll give this plug, but I think start with Jeff's book Against All Odds and read his story, because I certainly feel just by spending this time together, I feel like I'm a slightly I feel like my attitude slightly turned up. It's just having this conversation even. So if you're listening and you're feeling
Mm.
challenged, then go and get an audio book of some of the people we've mentioned and read, and start that mentoring journey, even if it's just through book form. And you can't go wrong with John Maxwell. I agree with you, Jeff. Can you just tell us, how can people follow you online, and also find your book online, Jeff?
Yeah. So, well, a couple of things. It's interesting because you just asked what can people do to get started. I think everybody listening to this has already got started because they're listening to your podcast.
Yeah, true.
So maybe one of the best things they can do is go back in your library and listen to all of your podcasts because you got some great resources there. And so that would be a great start on that. So you can actually go online. You can follow me on Twitter, or you can follow me on Facebook. The surname is Lestz. And then also, Jonno, I'd like to say, they certainly can go on to Amazon and download the audiobook Against All Odds, which I'm the author of, or they can order the hard copy. But what I'd like to do
Hmm.
is for all of your listeners, and I hope this is okay with you, Jono,
Yeah.
if they will contact you personally, I'm gonna give you access to the ebook, and you can freely give to anybody that emails you
Mm.
personally. They can get the book from you and a free copy of the ebook and read through it. And then all my details are also in the back of the book. I do answer every single email that comes to me. And I know some people find that hard to believe, but my email address is in the back of the book. And yeah, I'm happy to help coach people any way that I can.
That's so generous. And if you'd like to take Jeff up on that offer, which is super generous, please do send me an email. You can send that to Jonno, Jonno, at consultclarity.org. That's Jonno at consultclarity.org. And I'll be very happy to pass on Jeff's ebook to you. That's just such a kind offer. Well, I want to thank our listeners for tuning in. Like I said, I just really believe there'll be a bunch of you who have stopped jogging and sat down to listen, or, pulled over, because it's one of those episodes where I think, the right place, right time. It's I really believe some people, this will be a bit of a game changer for you, which I just love. I really do love that. Don't forget, I also have the Jonno White Leadership Podcast and the Leadership Question of the Day podcast. Two other places you can go to continue to invest in your leadership. But I want to finish today by saying a massive thank you to you, Jeff, for being, first of all, so generous with your time, but so vulnerable. Your story is mind-blowing, and I feel very, I just feel very honored that you shared that with me today, and it's definitely been an encouragement to me, and I know it will be to our listeners, and it's also just been a joy to spend time with you. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Well, thank you, Jonno, for having me today. It's been an honor. And I'm excited about getting plugged into all of your other podcasts.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast as much as I did. If you're joining us for the first time, don't forget to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, including our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from all over the world in all different roles, in different industries, answer these 7 questions on leadership, and leaders give these in-depth answers around how they spend their time, a book that's been significant for them. It's just a gold mine. It's completely free to access, so go to consultclarity.org and look for that. We'd also love to interview you about your leadership. I believe your experience, your life, your context means that you have advice on leadership that other leaders can learn from. Yes, you, if you're going, not me, well, no, I really believe you would have something to add. So if you're looking for a way to give back, it's completely free to get involved. And we would love to interview you through the 7 Questions on Leadership. You just go to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form and get involved. We have a free resource on our website called the Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook, 10 world-class leaders giving their thoughts on leadership, and that's completely free. It's available on our homepage, consultclarity.org, right at the top, so make sure you go and get that and download it today. And we have a free daily email that you can subscribe to. We send this out to over 15,000 leaders from around the world. And it contains the highlights of content from our podcasts, our blogs, our books we're reading. It's got the best content, and it gives you exclusive, limited, early access to our masterclasses, workshops, new products, special offers. It's all for our subscribers. You can go to consultclarity.org/subscribe and join 15,000 other leaders. And my gift to you is to work really hard, particularly through the Leadership Conversations podcast. I have been blown away by the quality of the leaders, and I'm learning as much as anyone in doing these interviews. So I'm having a great time. And my gift to you is to keep lining up the best leaders I can to invest in your leadership. Your gift to me, if you're finding this helpful, there is something that you could do that would help us out massively. And that is to write a review and to leave a rating for our podcast or wherever you're watching or listening to this. I can't tell you how much that helps us out. Also, subscribe or follow. It really does make a difference in helping us to help more leaders become everything they're meant to be. Another thing that means a lot to me personally is when I see our community share our content. So if you do share this or any other piece of content on social media, then thank you, and please do that. And look for me, Jonno White, or Clarity, and tag us in your post. Our team is always looking for posts to engage with from our community, and there's also a chance that we'll share your content to go beyond and share it with our followers. Last of all, you can check out my book. It's called Step Up or Step Out: How to Deal with Difficult People Even If You Hate Conflict. I wrote this book because 50% of the coaching sessions I have with leaders, this topic comes up again and again and again. And it's this idea of, how do I have this difficult conversation? How do I lead this person better when I'm finding them difficult? Or in some cases, you look and you say, I think I might be leading a difficult person. They're just quite difficult to lead, or I'm finding them quite difficult to lead. So there's a 3-step process that I unpack in Step Up or Step Out. And the amazing thing, and I've literally done this myself, and I've heard it anecdotally from other leaders as I've coached them, is that if you follow this process, you will see that person step up and change their behavior or make a decision, which is to step out some of the time. 95% of the time, people will step up or step out in just 4 weeks. And I stand by that. It's you have to read the book to understand, but I really do believe in it, and I've experienced it firsthand. It works. So you can go to Amazon, look up Step Up or Step Out Jonno White, or store.consultclarity.org/book. Well, thank you so much for listening. We're going to be back with a new episode next time of the Leadership Conversations podcast. And I hope today has helped you to take another step towards becoming the leader you're meant to be. See you next time.